There is a class of creatures in the world, seen by only a few people, but never proven to exist. We collectively refer to such creatures as unidentified mysterious animal, unconfirmed organisms, abbreviated as UMA. Hello everyone and welcome to the UMA series. Van Meter is a small town in southern Iowa, USA, west of Des Moines. In the early 1840s, the U.S. government, through treaties, forced the Sauk and Fox tribes to relocate westward and effectively seized control of this land. Its fertile soil and abundant resources soon attracted large numbers of white settlers. Cabins and churches sprang up. As time passed, more and more immigrants came here seeking opportunity, bringing with them a variety of different religious beliefs, animal totems, elements of witchcraft, and supernatural worship. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the budding era of modern natural science, for ordinary people, almost anything, no matter how bizarre, seemed possible. And today's topic I'm sharing also challenged people's understanding in that era. A large humanoid flying creature that appeared in America even earlier than the Mothman, the Van Meter monster. The Van Meter monster is also called the Van Meter visitor. The specific name depends on the media report. People describe it as a half-human, half-beast flying creature, about 8 to 9 feet tall, with a pair of bat-like but extraordinarily large, wing-like appendages, red eyes, and a horn-like protrusion on the top of its head that emitted a bright light. It was said to be immune to bullets, as if it didn't belong to this world. In 2013, 3 American paranormal investigators, Chad Lewis, Noah Voss, and Kevin Lee Nelson, conducted detailed investigations and interviews about the Van Meter events, and compiled the information into a book titled The Van Meter Visitor. Next, I'll use that book as the primary reference, together with newspapers of the time, to share the story in chronological order as the events unfolded. Around 1 a.m. on September 29, 1903, a farm implement dealer in Van Meter, Julius Griffith, was walking home as usual when near the Mather Gregg building, he suddenly noticed a lighthouse-like bright light shining from the roof. But there had never been lighting installed there. He suspected a burglar might have climbed onto the roof, so he slowly approached the building. Just as he was about to reach the front, something unexpected happened. That light suddenly moved to the building across the street. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it probably wasn't a thief, but he was also astonished. What kind of glowing object could traverse the sky like that, and how did it move? He didn't continue to track it, but went straight home. Locally, Griffith was a reliable, respected figure, a member of the town council, so when he told neighbors what he had experienced, people didn't think he was making it up. The strange events recurred the next night. At about 12:30 a.m. on September 30th, 1903, the town doctor of Van Meter, Dr. Alcott, was awakened by a strong light. That day he was resting in the apartment behind his office, and the light shone in from the window. No patient would wake him in such a way. With that thought, he grabbed the gun at hand and ran outside, coming face to face with the source of the light. It was a creature beyond comprehension. He described it as a half-human, half-beast monster with huge bat-like wings. In the middle of its forehead was a short, blunt horn emitting a blinding light. By then, he was already close to the creature and caught a whiff of a dizzying stench. Without thinking further, he decided to shoot the animal on the spot. After 5 consecutive shots, Alcott realized the bullets had no effect on the creature. Terrified, he retreated to his office, locked every door and window, gripped his pistol with 1 bullet left, and waited for daylight. He didn't know when the creature left. The mood in town began to shift after people heard Alcott's account. Combined with Griffith's report from the night before, it all sounded even chillinger. Van Meter's bank manager, Clarence Dunn, believed the strange events might be the work of thieves. As the local official in charge, he had to protect people's property. So that night, he decided to guard the bank. He figured no one could stand up to his modern, fully loaded gun. Soon, it was around 1 a.m. again. Some said closer to 2 a.m. The town clock struck, and Dunn also heard a strange noise outside the window, like the panting of a wild beast. Curious, he looked out. Suddenly, a bright beam shone through the front window onto him. The sudden glare nearly blinded him. When his eyes adjusted, he looked again, and there was a huge thing. He couldn't bear it anymore, raised his gun to fire at the creature. "Get away from me!" Panicked, he didn't give chase, nor did he open the window. The bullets shattered the glass and frame, and then the light vanished. Dunn didn't know how the thing left, but a heavy creature shouldn't have gone far. The next day, the townspeople searched, but found nothing except a few suspicious tracks. According to the Des Moines Daily News, Dunn even made a plaster cast of one of the footprints. On October 1st, 1903, Mr. White, proprietor of the Van Meter hardware store, heard a strange shuffling sound coming from the floor above his shop. Given the recent spate of odd events, he took up his gun and went upstairs. He opened the window and peered into the drizzling street, but saw nothing. Soon, as his eyes adjusted to the dark, he suddenly spotted a huge black shape on the crossarm of a nearby utility pole, less than 15 feet from him. Mr. White reacted quickly, slowly aiming the gun at the thing, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. The shot rang out, but the monster didn't fall as he expected. Instead, it lunged at him, the light from its head shining his way. Apart from the fright, the bullet had no effect on the creature. At that moment, a powerful stench filled the air, almost making White faint. The gunfire woke the owner of the shop across the street, Sidney Gregg. He opened his door and looked out, just in time to see the monster climbing down from the pole. Gregg described an incredible creature, moving in a very peculiar way, using huge claws to grip the pole like a parrot, descending slowly and clumsily. When it reached the ground, it stood about 8 feet tall, roughly 2.4 meters. A bright light shone from the center of its forehead like a powerful flashlight. It flapped its huge, unwieldy wings and hopped forward like a kangaroo. As he watched the creature, the rumble of a train came from the nearby tracks, along with its whistle. The creature seemed startled by the sound. It suddenly crouched, as if about to spring off the next second, then quickly broke into a run on all fours, heading toward the old coal mine. Yes, on all fours, that is how the original record puts it. And as it ran, it spread its wings and took off as if gliding, soon disappearing into the darkness.
On October 2, news of the monster's appearance spread throughout the town. Everyone was talking about this mysterious visitor. No one had seen or even heard of such a strange creature. The fear of the unknown began to spread like a virus. That night, a light rain began to fall. The mine manager, Pratt Jr., heard strange sounds coming from deep within an abandoned shaft, like the howls of devils and goblins. As he drew closer, the sounds grew louder. In the next instant, a monster burst from the shaft's opening, soaring into the sky. The shocking scene didn't end there. Right behind the first creature came a second, slightly smaller one. Almost all the workers present saw the two creatures. Some of the braver men even moved closer to the shaft. Mr. Pratt described a foot-like bump on the creature's foreheads that gave off an eerie glow. The sightings that night spread quickly through the town. Lights went on everywhere. Men donned broad-brimmed hats and raincoats, took up arms and converged on the mine, ready to wipe out the creatures when they returned. The long wait left many exhausted. At around 5:45 a.m., as the sky grew light, a large and a small bat-like silhouette approached the old shaft. In the next moment, a volley of gunfire thundered across the area, answered only by strange cries from the creatures and a foul odor. The scene instantly descended into chaos. However, none of it stopped the monster's advance. They went straight into the depths of the old mine and vanished. So, the men gathered all the dynamite they could find and blasted the entrance shut. From that day on, the monsters were never seen again. People speculated they may have gotten lost in the complex tunnels underground, or were injured by dynamite and bullets, silently waiting for death in some corner. Journalist Phillips was the first to record the sequence of events in writing. His report appeared on October 4, 1903, in the Des Moines Daily News, after which major newspapers reprinted the story to varying degrees. And that, in short, is the entire Van Meter monster incident. Of course, there may have been embellishments by the authors or the media. After entering the 21st century, the Van Meter case drew attention again. Some recent documentaries and online media reports also mention new witnesses. But I believe these reports are unreliable, since they all cluster in just the last few years. It's hard to imagine a creature not appearing for a full century, yet conveniently being sighted once it becomes famous. So, returning to the main question, the towering stature, bat-like wings, the glowing horn-like appendage, plus a possible four-legged gait, the image in the Van Meter accounts matches none of the known creatures we have today. So what exactly did the residents see back then? Author Noah Voss's main theory in the text is still that the so-called visitor might have been a species not yet recorded by science, or a descendant of some extinct creature. First, assuming it was a misidentification of a large bird, setting aside any optical illusions in the dark about whether it had feathers, the California condor is, as of now, the largest bird known to inhabit North America, and the biggest recorded individuals have wingspans reaching 3 meters. Its plumage is entirely black, with white patches on the underside of the wings, which could cause color-based misidentification. The Andean condor of South America is currently known as the largest bird of prey in the world. Its overall coloration is similar to the California condor, with a wattle on the neck surrounded by a ruff of white feathers. It is larger, with a maximum wingspan reaching 3.3 meters. In addition, other large species and golden eagles are all candidates to consider, but none of them match the Van Meter monster's size and form. Here, Noah Voss points out that sightings of flying creatures are very likely to involve visual errors, and since all the incidents occurred at night, it's natural to doubt the reliability of eyewitness accounts. Even so, he still believes the Van Meter monster was unlikely to be a known bird or a bat, because around the same period throughout North America, there were numerous reports of similar flying creatures. For example, the Elizabeth Lake monster in California in the late 19th century, the Snallygaster in Maryland in 1902, the Stansbury Island creature in Utah in 1903, and the frequently reported Jersey Devil sightings in the 19th century, etc. The creatures described in these reports share features strikingly similar to the Van Meter monster. Bat-like wings, huge claws, unnerving cries, nocturnal habits, and so on. This raises the possibility of a new species we have yet to discover and confirm. The UN Environment Program has mentioned more than once that as human society develops, vast numbers of species are going extinct at a rate beyond our imagination. So is it possible that some bizarre creature reports, including the Van Meter monster, came from species not yet discovered by humans that disappeared from history due to habitat loss, abrupt environmental changes, or water pollution, thus leaving us with unsolved mysteries like the Van Meter case? As for why the creature could emit light and resist physical attacks, traits that seem to defy natural laws, that would require further study. Another author, Nelson, mentions that the Van Meter visitor may not belong to this dimension at all. Here he mainly cites American journalist John Keel's ultra-terrestrial concept proposed in the Mothman prophecies. In brief, the elves, fairies, and gods depicted in ancient folklore are essentially the same kind of beings as later creatures like the Mothman that people reported seeing, just called different names. Every era interprets them in their own way, but without exception, these beings are oddly shaped and to some extent not bound by physical laws. They aren't necessarily extraterrestrial, nor necessarily flesh and blood. They are beings that coexist with us, but exist in another time frame, with power in a kind of energetic state. He also mentions the holographic universe and the observer effect in quantum mechanics, that three-dimensional reality is a projection of higher dimensional information. Thus, the Van Meter visitor's apparent immunity to bullets, its non-physical nature, might be because its essence is a fragment of higher dimensional information, or because human consciousness participates in constructing reality, and so on. All of his hypotheses are controversial. He frames these mysterious events as challenges to the boundaries of human cognition, a decidedly subversive perspective. By contrast with the above beyond common sense conjectures, paranormal researcher Chad Lewis offers the opposite theory. He believes the entire Van Meter monster affair was an elaborate hoax. First, Van Meter had no town newspaper in 1903. The first report appeared as a special feature in the Des Moines Daily News, that is, in a supplement. This section did not require standard newsroom vetting, meaning the truthfulness of the content could not be rigorously verified. Moreover, the paper published 2 follow-up debunking pieces within the next 2 days, claiming that Phillips's account exaggerated the facts, but the authors of those debunkings did not reveal their identities. As for the motive behind the hoax, it may have simply been to attract attention, thus making it easier for certain people to profit, much like the Cardiff Giant and the Hodog at the end of the 19th century. But the problem with this theory is that the Van Meter incident had only a brief flare-up from late September to early October 1903. There weren't many people or media outlets hyping the story. From start to finish, the whole affair lasted only about half a month. Even if there were orchestrators behind it, it didn't lead to tourism or any commercial boom, with no clear path to profit. In short, he judges the credibility of the entire event to be low, even highly likely to have arisen from the witness's own suggestibility or misperceptions born of panic, what we often call mass hysteria.
Personally, I tend to favor the hoax theory. But if I must offer my own judgment, we need to return to a fundamental question. Namely, why did all the key sightings cluster so tightly, breaking out between September 29th and October 2nd, 1903? Just 4 days. Such extreme compression in time doesn't align with typical patterns of biological migration, geological activity, or even mass hysteria. It looks more like a carefully staged performance, with the entire town of Van Meter as the audience. Across all the reports, the glowing horn on the monster's forehead served as the core identifying feature. Yet at that time, electric lighting was not widespread, and nighttime light sources were scarce. With no clear predatory need and no attacks on humans, why would a self-luminous creature frequently appear in populated areas? Notably, many witnesses mentioned that blinding beam and the pungent smell. This reminds me of will-o'-the-wisp pranks popular in the late 19th century, where some people used white phosphorus, which oxidizes in the dark, to emit a faint blue-green glow, smearing phosphorus on gravestones or cloth strips to create ghostly effects and frighten others. White phosphorus is highly toxic and ignites easily, with an auto-ignition temperature in air of about 40 degrees Celsius. Even below 40 degrees Celsius, friction or slow oxidation can generate enough heat to raise local temperature to the ignition point. In humid conditions, it burns more slowly. The Van Meter incident occurred in summer, on damp, rainy nights. White phosphorus itself has a pungent, garlic-like odor, and when it burns, it produces phosphorus pentoxide, which has a slightly irritating, acidic smell. Incomplete combustion can also create acrid chemical odors. This could explain what people reported smelling. As for the monster's appearance and its apparent invulnerability, I suspect early projection devices may have been used. For example, the magic lantern, an optical enlarger that uses convex lenses to project images onto a screen, a precursor to modern projectors. Such projection machines were very popular in the 19th century, commonly used in education, but also often for pranks. Recalling eyewitness Griffith's initial account of a lighthouse-like glow moving across the sky, and Greg's later description of four-legged motion and bullet resistance, it seems plausible someone deliberately used such devices to simulate an animal leaping or flying. Most witnesses also said the creature's light appeared suddenly and woke them, but aside from the workers at the end, no one actually saw how the creature left. Using white phosphorus and common devices to fake it may sound far-fetched, but I think it's a relatively reasonable explanation. As for the issue of physical evidence, there are major doubts. Chad Lewis notes in his book that we cannot now locate the footprint cast that Dunn reportedly made back then. It may well be because in 1911, Van Meter suffered a serious fire. There was no museum or similar institution at the time, so if a cast existed, it was likely stored in a densely populated area or at the site itself, such as the bank, for public viewing. But that fire virtually destroyed Van Meter's core district, and much essential material and evidence was burned. Oddly, in my search, I found that American cryptozoologist Professor Lauren Coleman wrote in a 2018 blog that the International Cryptozoology Museum had launched an exhibition about the Van Meter visitor, and in the photos, there appears to be a footprint-like cast. So whether Lewis later found credible evidence, we simply don't know. Of course, these are just my personal suppositions. The image of a glowing bird-like giant in the Van Meter case reminds me of the ropin of Papua New Guinea we discussed earlier, also luminous, also nocturnal. We don't know what evidence the 1911 fire may have destroyed. Perhaps the Van Meter monster really existed, a large flying species outside our current understanding. Or perhaps what was erased were the final traces of a collective creation. It's also possible. Today, on the outskirts of Van Meter, the collapsed old mine has been sealed off, but our exploration of the unknown has never stopped. What exactly was that creature? The answer may no longer matter. What truly deserves our caution is how we tell the story. When we reduce unconfirmed organisms to mere sensational labels, are we also snuffing out the chance to understand complex history? Perhaps. Today, outside Van Meter, the collapsed old mine has been cordoned off, but our pursuit of the unknown has never ceased. What that creature was is no longer the key point. What matters is the way we tell such stories. When we reduce unconfirmed organisms to curiosity-driven tags, do we with our own hands extinguish the possibility of grasping a complex past? All right, one last thought. The unknown will always outweigh the known.
That is the charm of ambiguity. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.